Next question, this will be directed at candidate Robinson. Recently, the city, with the assistance of the federal government, has set aside $1 million for a proposed community center at Cesar Chavez Park. How can you help ensure this proposal becomes a reality and within a satisfactory timeline?
Well, again, if you fund a center but you don't fund the programs to go in the center, then you're really not doing much. As the only candidates calling for the restoration of the funding for our after-school programs, our senior centers, our libraries like South Mountain Community College and Cesar Chavez Library, I really do want to invest in the programs that make our neighborhood stronger. Look, it helps our property values, but it also helps our kids succeed in a 21st century economy. Our kids need to learn how to be creative. They need to learn how to be problem solvers. The next multimillionaire in our neighborhood to come out of Levine will start a Google or an Apple. They won't necessarily work on an assembly line. So you've got to fund the programs to put into these community centers. So as the only candidate calling for the restoration of this funding, it is a direct correlation to the community centers that not only exist, the Hermoso pools, the South Mountain Community Libraries, the after-school programs, half of which have been cut in this city, the Phoenix after-school programs. If you don't fund those, you can build a $1 million building, but nobody's going to have anything to do in it. And our kids aren't going to prosper. And in fact, you're not going to attract businesses here because there will be no amenities for their employees. So that's the big contrast here. You got to fund the programs that put into the buildings. As we know, we've got many open and empty buildings here, but you don't have the programs that are at the heart of a community. And I know that a lot of folks in the audience who we've spoken to have made up for that gap by creating the public-private partnerships, and I think that's great. But we also need to make sure that we're really generous to our families and to our neighbors, that we do the basic things that count to make our neighborhood stronger, and that's what I want to do on the council.
Thank you. Candidate Rodriguez?
Well, I'm certainly not opposed to a recreation center, but I think we really got to look at money. I mean, this is what we're talking about, and when people say we got to restore funding, there's plenty of money in the city. I mean, the city manager just got a $78,000 raise. That's your tax money. He's getting paid $315,000 a year. The Vice President of the United States makes $247,000 a year. The highest paid governor in the entire United States makes $187,000 a year. Our governor in the state of Arizona makes $95,000 a year. He's making more than 3 times what the governor makes. Do you understand that? That's your money. Where'd that money come from? They just negotiated raises, step pay, and all this other kind of money, compensation for city workers worth between $132 and $137 million. Give me that money and I've got plenty for all his programs. They would have all been paid for. Every single one of them twice. We could have probably been open 24 hours. This isn't about programs. This is about how the city is spending your money. And it's wasting it. There's so much development we could do. There's so many programs that we could have. There's so many things we could do for the citizen, but we're wasting money like it grows on a tree somewhere at City Hall. And it's just not true, and we can't sustain it. We cannot sustain the kind of spending that we're doing now. So the real key is to find inefficiencies and stop spending your money, because it's not the city's money, it's your money. And that's where we're going to make hay. That's where we're going to make progress in funding all these programs.
Thank you, Candidate Rodriguez. Candidate Stewart?
I could say to Mr. Rodriguez, amen, brother. That was quite a message he just delivered on stewardship. As a pastor of a church, we start every year with a zero budget. We start at zero and have to raise the funds to pay salaries, pay the bills, do maintenance, serve the people, do social services. And yes, I would like restored funding to many of the services that were decreased during the recession. But let's not have amnesia about how we got into the recession. We kind of overdid it, overspent, were very greedy, and the nation's economy almost went into a depression. And so, yes, I believe in restoring services, I believe in recreation centers, I believe in senior centers, after-school programs, but we must be good stewards. I think we have evidence that the city has been a relatively good steward in saving $59 million a year or so ago, but they need to continue to do that through cost management, through efficiency and innovation. And as we have more income, we can restore the services incrementally, including the one down on baseline. But I hope we haven't gotten amnesia about how we got into this difficulty, and so many families and individuals are still paying the price of poor stewardship.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to the next question. This will be, sorry.
Sky Eagle.
Apologize.
Thank you. I was proud to join about half the people in this room at the Levine City of Phoenix budget hearing to call for funding for the recreation center. Although I did not do it as eloquently as Jen did. It was some great speeches from people here, and she really brought down the room. If you didn't have a chance to see her, we're lucky to have an advocate like that. And the city is doing more on the recreation center. I do have a little bit of a different vision of it than the city is going toward right now. I would like to see a swimming pool as part of the recreation center. I hear from so many people who say, I have to drive my kids 30, 45 minutes to go to swim lessons. And we deserve some of the same things near us that the city has in the other areas. So I've also been an advocate for a lot more investment in parks. When many of the Levine communities were designed, land was set aside for parks, and it's still sitting vacant. District 8 does not have any public Phoenix-funded dog parks. We're paying for the dog parks in other parts of the city, and I said we ought to get our fair share here as well. So that's something I'll continue to advocate for, and I'm proud to have been involved and fighting for more of these funding for years before I started running. And so I want to disagree with what Lawrence says, that the other people up here don't want to fund it, all these programs. I just don't want to fund it with the food tax, which is how he wants to fund it. I've talked about that the city has excess assets, including land that is sitting unproductively and attracting crime. And I think we can sell some of those assets and create good jobs, reduce the crime. I've also spoken to many people here, like Phil gave me some great ideas about how we can improve the auction process at the city of Phoenix. There's a lot of fat to be caught, and I don't think that tax increase is always the right answer. So, I mean, there is a difference of opinion, but we value these programs equally.
Thank you, Kennedy Gaido. Now, we move on to the next question, which will be addressed to candidate Rodriguez. Famous quote by George Santayana: "Those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it." Referring to this quote, what mistake or mistakes have you observed by the present council member do you intend not to make or do differently?
Well, you know, I'm just running on transparency and accountability. And so what I would do differently is make sure that residents know how their money is being spent. Accountability, to me, is about how we live. I mean, we all work hard. We all want the best for our kids. We all want the best for our community. But I think there's been some hocus pocus, if you will, on how money is being spent. You know, Mr. Stewart adequately said that, you know, we were in a bad way a few years ago with the recession. So you got to ask yourself, how in the worst recession since the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis, did the city manager negotiate a contract that within it gives out $132 million worth of raises over the next 2 years? That's accountability. We need to find out where the money is going. It's my number one thing, because that money then can be used to do what government's supposed to do: provide security, provide the services that all these candidates are fighting for, and to provide infrastructure for all the citizens that live in the city and in the district, and to provide what we need to create economic development. So I think transparency is probably the number one thing I would do differently. Transparency so that I'm accountable, the city's accountable for the money that they're spending. And so you know everything that's going on behind the smoke and mirrors that is the city council. And you know where your money's going, because it's important for you to know.
Thank you. Candidate Stewart?
The first resident of District 8 that used the word ignored to me, when she said that, she was a senior citizen, she's a widow, and her husband had served for a long time, served in the community. I couldn't help but to feel for the current council person, because he's been the council person for the last 3 terms. And in a session like this, he was in the audience, but I said it, that I keep hearing all over this, people are tired of being ignored. So whether perception is reality, or whether there are areas where he has ignored or been busy doing other things, it renewed my commitment that I will burn the midnight oil, I will do whatever it is necessary if I'm privileged to become the city council person, that no resident will say that I'm tired of being ignored after my first term. So to answer your question, I hope I've answered it. Obviously, there are many people who feel that the current city councilman did not address or did not give them the attention that they needed and were owed.
Thank you. Candidate Gallego?
As someone who works in economic development, I'd like to see the next District 8 City Council member have a little bit more of a vision about what they want to see happen with the economy in Phoenix. I've worked with Councilman Johnson on many issues. One of them was the general plan. During the budget downturn, the city considered not updating the plan, not having the public process that the state asks us to have every 10 years, and just sending to the voters the old map and not updating it. And I met with Councilman Johnson and tried to persuade him that that was really important. Ultimately, I was not successful. He voted not to do it, but luckily, the rest of the city council decided that that was something we want to update, and now we're in the middle of that process. And I think that's enormously important because this area is going through a lot of change, but we also need to make sure we have a vision of where we want to go. There's a lot of uses along the riverbed, including rock products companies, that are about to hit the end of their useful life, and we need to have a dialogue about what we want to see happen along the river. If we look at what Tempe has done along the river, they've taken land that used to be a landfill and now is the Tempe Center for the Arts. They, as a community, said that they really wanted to develop the area on the Salt Riverbed and make it an asset for economic development. And I'm hoping that we will be able to do that in Phoenix because we are so lucky to be near open spaces along the river, along South Mountain, and we need to talk about what we want to do with them. We also have a lot of exciting development in District 8 on the bioscience side. And I talked to people at one hospital who say they're going to start an incubator. And then I go to Gateway College and they're going to start a bioscience incubator. And then I went to a second hospital that was going to start a bioscience incubator. And none of them knew about what the other one was doing. And so I hope to show leadership and get us to coordinate. Because we don't need 3 bioscience incubators. But we do need to have that industry develop and have a more diverse economy. And so I hope to show
Thank you.
leadership.
Candidate Gallego. Next, Candidate Robinson.
So I was lucky enough to have a family that built from the ground up right here in this district a daycare center. And it was a small business. It helped kids, but it created jobs and also sustained my family. It was our small business. So I know about budgets and cost-cutting measures. But I also know that many candidates come in front of us year after year with great plans and proposals, but don't level with you and tell you the truth. And yes, Ms. Gallego is correct. We're talking about the food tax. And many of the people who support other candidates on this panel voted for that food tax. Now, here's one thing they also did. They voted to make it expire in 2015. We're talking about people on the left of the spectrum, people on the right, Republicans, Democrats. They served in many of the same committee rooms and meetings that we're talking about in the budget, and guess what? They, in a bipartisan fashion, said, this is the one way to sustain these services. Now, not every kid got to grow up in a daycare center, not every kid got to go to soccer and after-school programs like myself. And I know that not every one of your kids or grandchildren are gonna have that same opportunity, but guess what? A lot of them need it. And it's the backbone of a lot of the services and neighborhoods and families right here in Laveen. And if we don't fund it, we're going to fall into the trap that the head of Intel stated when he opened up his new plant, which is going to create hundreds and hundreds of jobs out in Chandler. And he said, if the educational system would have been what it was like in Arizona when we first decided to put Intel here, wouldn't have moved it here. So guess what? To bring the jobs, to raise our families, we've got to level with you, and that's the difference. I'm honest. I'm against the food tax. It's not raising it. It's already there until 2015. But unlike my opponents, I won't cut it before. And unlike one of my opponents, I won't sell the land out from under our neighborhoods to find a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Let's find the solution to that problem by 2015. But before that, let's not cut these vital services, including the Rio Salado Habitat Project, which is funded by this food tax.
Thank you, candidate Robinson.